وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا محضرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في ظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن اعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نعمره ننكس في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر ما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر فيها منافع مشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند محضرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم ير الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام الرميم قل يحيي الذي أنشاها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر إذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى هو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون. Alhamdulillah. This is a great blessing that we find ourselves sitting in what we should consider to be the company of Imam al-Haddad and of the shuyukh, because they mentioned that one of the ways to keep the companionship with somebody is to read their works and to read their books. So even though this is a reading session, is that if we expand our perspective, it can be more than a reading session. It can be actually spending. So imagine that we lived in the time of Imam al-Haddad, and imagine that he had students and he had his family, and that students would come and they would enter his presence, and that they would read to him, and that they're sitting in front of him, and that they would hear directly what he was saying, and that they're experiencing what they're experiencing. So we should keep that to mind, and if we have that intention and if we have that perspective, then inshallah we'll get a portion of that. And this is a blessed gathering which Imam al-Haddad he established in his lifetime, where on the last Tuesday of the Islamic month they would get together and read his various books, read some portions of his various books. And it's not a planned lesson, it's more of what comes to heart, and not just what comes to heart of the person who's speaking or presenting, but what comes to heart for every single individual. So when blessed words are read or in the Quran is recited, that's a means for openings, right? And sometimes these openings, you might just be sitting there and all of a sudden a thought comes to your mind, or a feeling comes to your mind, or a realization comes to your mind, and that those are types of openings, and those are types of waridat, they come from Allah. And generally speaking, those openings and those gifts is that they could come for no reason, Sometimes out of nowhere they might come, but generally speaking, they come when we're in a good atmosphere, right? When we're with the people, the pious people, when we're in our salah, in Ramadan, various avenues. But this is definitely, if we expose ourselves, this is definitely one of those avenues that Allah can have make an opening for us, and will benefit from that. And one of the sheikhs, he mentioned that he read multiple volumes of tafsir, and he said that despite all that tafsir that I read, my heart still wasn't quenched. It was something I was still searching for. And then he said that one day he read Sabbih Isma Rabbikal A'la, just that verse, and said Allah opened an understanding for him. And said from that day on is that I found what I was looking for. Right? So Allah opened that for him, and he found what he was looking for. His heart was satiated with that. So Bismillah, we start with councils of religion, and you can go ahead and read. I think it's the first tab. Sidi Hamid. It's the first tab, right? It should be. Yeah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Councils of Religion by Imam al-Haddad. Page 31, third paragraph down. Now that the frequent remembrance of death is a good thing and to be encouraged, it brings important benefits and profits, among which are short hopes, detachment from the world, contentment with little, and desire for the hereafter, accompanied by gathering provision of good works and preparation for it. The Messenger of God, may God's blessings and peace be upon him, said, "Remember often the defeater of pleasures," meaning death. He used to rise at night, may blessings and peace be upon him, and call out to the people, "Death has come with what it carries in its train." The first blast shivers, to be followed by the second. And when he was asked, may God's blessing and peace be upon him, about who the perspicacious among people were, he said, "Those who remember death most often and who prepare for it best. Those are the perspicacious. Theirs is honor in this world and a noble rank in the next." I say, to be beneficial, the remembrance of death should not be for a person to repeat, "Death, death," for this is of little benefit, even if abundant. Rather, this should be accompanied by presence of the heart and reflection on what will one's state be when death comes with its terror and throes, when one begins to see the things or the hereafter. How long is one to live yet, and how will one's life be concluded? How did one's peers and those of his companions who preceded him do at the moment of death? To which condition have they gone? And other similar reflections and reminders which are likely to influence the heart in a profitable way. One of our ancestors said, "Consider anything that you do and would be pleased for death to come to you while doing it, keep to it. But anything that you do and would detest death to find you doing it, avoid it." Reflect on these words. May God have mercy on you, for they are of immense benefit for he who would act accordingly. Success and help are from God. There is no other Lord than He. Continue.
Yeah. Let's just continue. What's the next? Okay, I got it.
That's better.
So, mashallah, Imam Haddad, he's reminding us of this idea that we have in our religion, is that we remember death, right? And we don't remember death to be morbid or to be, pessimistic or anything like that. But everything in life is an example, and everything in life the believer can take benefit from. And the understanding of the remembrance of death, one of the ways that we could understand it, is that it's like a deadline. Is that this life has a deadline. And, generally speaking, when people forget their deadlines, they slack, or they get distracted, or they do something else. But when someone has a deadline in front of them, is that they take the necessary preparations to prepare for that deadline. So death is the deadline. And Imam Haddad, he says here that we shouldn't just, remembering death isn't superficial. We don't just say death, 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 or something like that. It's not like you're making dhikr and you're saying death to someone, right? That's not remembering death. It's the reality that, you have an appointment. You have an appointment. And you have an appointment with Allah. And you have to keep that in mind. That we should never forget that we have an appointment. Every single individual has an individual personal appointment with Allah, and that's death. Right? Death is the door to that appointment. So if someone gave you an appointment and you forgot about it, right? There's consequences even in this world. Right? You missed your appointment. There's going to be negative. Sometimes you have to pay a fine or something like that, or you don't get your appointment back, or there's consequences. So likewise, if we have an appointment with Allah and we forget about that, right? There's consequences to that as well. And then he mentions that one of the Salaf, one of the scholars, they said that you could take death as a balance, as a test, as a limit, as a test. So think about what you're currently involved in. Think about all your preoccupations during your day. Think about where you spend your time. Think about what you do during the day. And then think about, okay, what would happen if I died that same night? Are you happy with yourself? Are you happy with everything that you're doing during the day? Or are there things that you say, oh, you know what? If I really knew that I was going to die, I would change that. I would change this. So if we think about how productive and how beneficial it would be in our lives if we actually had this balance in our life where we acted as if we were going to die. Right? How much, our relationships, even if you just think about the relationships that we have with people, is that think about how we would be with those people. Right? We would, if you felt that person was going to die, you'd have mercy for that person, you'd have compassion for that person, you'd feel it's too late when somebody dies, and then you say, oh, I wish I did better, I wish I contacted him more, I wish. But if we keep the meaning of death in front of our eyes, then it's not an empty wish, but it's actually a real action. And that this is the essence of remembering death. Right? This is the essence of remembering death, is that it's to propel us towards good actions, and to propel us and to motivate us throughout this life. Now, and one of the ways that he mentions here, this is also very important, is that not just remembers, because sometimes it might be a little bit abstract for people, or it might be a little bit hard to reflect, how do I remember death, right? We don't know exactly the realities of the grave, right? That might take a little bit of time to develop, and you have to be aware of the Quran and the Hadith. There's also another way that is actually very important and less abstract in remembering death, is that you read the ways in which the pious predecessors have died. Right, all the way from the companions to those who have passed away recently. And that you think about that, like, look how they lived their lives, look how they were blessed with this beautiful ending, or look at, you think about that, and you realize that that's something that you wish that Allah gives everybody. Right? There's a famous story of Sayyidina Bilal, when he was passing away, I believe in Syria, is that, his wife, she said, oh, this is a hard day, it's a difficult day. And then he responded that, no, this is a beautiful day, this is a blessed day, this is the day that I'm going to meet the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and his companions. Right? And you reflect upon that. And then also, you can reflect upon the opposite. You can reflect upon people who died, right? People who died in bad states. Right? And then you don't want to end up like that. There's one story that they mention. It's not a story, it's this, one of our teachers, somebody told them this, and this was in one of the Arab countries, that there was these two young men, two teenagers, and they used to be together, spend time together, listen to music and do all types of frivolous things, and they got into a car accident, right? and one of them was severely hurt, and the music was playing in the background, and all he could do was just recite the lyrics over and over again. And his friend, obviously they're Muslim, he said, say La ilaha illallah. He was panicking, say the kalima, say La ilaha illallah, trying to remember, trying to remind him of, husn al-khatam, a good ending. And all this person can do was just say the lyrics over and over and over again. Right? And that's a bad ending. There's two types of bad endings. There's a major bad ending, which we ask Allah for complete protection. That's when somebody dies in a state of kufr. Right? They reject Allah, or they say something that's kufr in those last minutes. And then a lesser bad ending is that they don't die in the state of kufr, but they die in sin. Right? They die in sin. And if you read, people who even in modern culture, they're popular people and people look up to them and they're celebrities. If you look at the way that some of them died, it's nothing to look up to. Right? Some of them, I don't want to mention names, but they actually choked. They were drunk, so drunk that they vomited and they choked on their own vomit, and that's how they died. So look how Allah treats the people of the next world who are successful, and also take example from those who are failures and who squandered their chances, and derive benefit. That's what reflection is deriving the benefit, taking an example. They say a wise person is not someone who learns from his mistakes, it's someone who learns from somebody else's mistakes. Because everyone should learn from their own mistakes, but not everyone's going to learn from somebody else's mistakes per se. So then the next book, we can read the next book, Da'wat al-Tam.
On counseling, reminding, threatening, and warning. If you have memorized the Quran and recited it, yet are not considered a scholar of religion, then in reality you have neither memorized the Quran nor recited it. This is then no more than a meaningless, empty form that will constitute proof against you. For the reciters are indeed the scholars, so long as they read it as they were commanded to, and recite it in the manner we have described. God it is who guides to what is right. We have discoursed at length on the carriers of the Quran, and how in the past they used to carry it together with its knowledge and the practice of it, until such time they became such that they could no longer be accounted among the scholars. See, may God have mercy on you, the difference between the past and the present. Then know that illusion and sedition have overcome the scholars, and they have turned away and become heedless. They have abandoned practicing what they know, and knowledge is now in their speech, but not their hearts, in their words and not their acts. Knowledge has thus become a proof against them. As he said, may blessings and peace be upon him. Knowledge is of two kinds, one in the heart, and this is beneficial knowledge, and another on the tongue, and this is God's proof against the son of Adam. And in his prayers, may blessings and peace be upon him, we find, O God, I ask of you beneficial knowledge. And he asked protection from all knowledge that is not beneficial and from a heart that is not humble.
So, these are really stern, powerful words, and scary. And this is one of the things that we should also consider, is that we want people, there's a culture of being hafidh of the Quran, but at the same time, the meanings and the reality and the knowledge of the Quran has to go along with that. So sometimes we have to reconsider what's the priority. Just merely memorizing and then not having the reality, or having the reality but not necessarily memorizing so much. And if you look at the companions, is that they definitely had the latter. Is that not all the companions, very few companions actually memorized the Quran, especially in the life of the Prophet. but they definitely were all scholars and people who implemented the Quran. May Allah protect us and give us afiyah, and may Allah forgive us and grant us beneficial knowledge. So what Imam Haddad is pointing at here is that not all knowledge is beneficial. Is that there's certain knowledge that even though it's knowledge, it actually doesn't benefit one. And carry on reading, and he goes on to say,
this shows that knowledge can be divided into the beneficial and the non-beneficial, and the people of knowledge into those who benefit from it and those who do not. For a certain kind of knowledge may well be beneficial in itself without he who has acquired it benefiting from it, because his behavior contradicts his knowledge. His state is as a dirty pot. If you put clean food in it, it spoils it. A certain scholar, may God's mercy be upon him, has said, abundant knowledge in an evil man is like water around the roots of a Jalsat tree. The more abundant it is, the more bitter the Jalsat becomes. Thus it seems that with this tree, the less water it receives, the less bitterness it produces. And so is the evil scholar. The less knowledge he has, the less sedition, corruption, and harm he is able to do. Do not consider this far-fetched, for human beings differ in their character, like trees and different kinds of soil differ in their composition and properties. Some kinds of trees and soils are better off when they receive abundant water, while others, such as trees with bitter fruits and those covered in thorns, which water increases in bitterness and thorns, and like salty soil, which becomes even more salty with water. Among the strange things that we hear in that spring rain.
So it's an amazing parable, is that knowledge, in a sense, is neutral. It's like water, fresh, clean, purifying water. However, the soil differs. So some soil can absorb that water, and other soil rejects that water. And some soil produces fruits, and other soil produces thorns and things that are harmful. So this really shows the importance of character and developing character, and specifically in the family unit, because knowledge might come at a later stage in life, but where does the foundation come from? It comes from the family unit and the way that someone's brought up, and the different influences that affects a person and develops his characteristic traits. And then this is something that even now in modern education, is that this is something that they're looking at, is that what makes students successful in their studies. So they've studied this in depth and exhaustively and thoroughly, is that what is it that makes students? Is it simply that they have a higher IQ, right? Or is it something else? And what they're getting closer to is that it goes back to having grit and being hardworking and having the right attitude as well as the right actions. So the right actions are being hardworking, right? Having grit, and these similar attributes. And then the right attitude is that having optimism, right? Having being what's the other meanings around that meaning? Being optimistic. What else was it? I can't remember the other attitudes, but persistence, right? So having the right attitude to life, right? And they found that it's students that combine those two that are successful, to the extent that they actually made this test. It's called the grit test, and there's this school that it's people who are graduating in the army. It's a highly disciplined school, and what they did is that they, by this test, they actually predicted who's going. And it's all intelligent students and the best of the best, So they actually predicted who's going to be successful and who's going to drop out, and it was based on this grit test, that how serious and industrious the students are. So it's interesting that it goes back to a person's essential character, and how that's formed. And it's not just formed in the house. Some things you can explain, and some things you can explain from that perspective, but other things, only Allah knows why. Or some you might see in one family different siblings, and every sibling is different, and some has different characteristics. Right? There's good in everything, but it just needs to be nourished, and it just needs to flourish. And what's the right conditions for that flourish is that person will produce things that are special, and he'll produce in his own way, and he'll bring forth things that are in his own way. And if collectively all of that comes together, is that's all beautiful and it's all beneficial. But it's just people have to find their own paths to flourish, and once they find that, is that all of us will flourish all together. And that's there's not one way of success. They talk about emotional intelligence. They talk about different types of intelligence. Right? When we think of intelligent people, we might just think, oh, he has a high IQ, or he's very smart in whatever subject it is. But there's different types of social intelligence, and they talk about these things nowadays, which is very interesting. So it's very interesting that Imam Haddad saying here is that knowledge, in a sense, is neutral. It's like that water, and it's the soil that produces the fruit. Right? So it's not just, oh, I want my son to be a scholar or hafiz, but something behind that also needs to be paid. And that's another reason why tasawwuf is so important, because the knowledge of tasawwuf gets right into the heart of the matter, which is the heart of man. Right into his characteristics, right into the diseases of the heart, right into the characteristics of the heart that a person has to have that are redemptive, that save him, that destroy him. So that's why it's really important and that's why you'll find that the likes of Imam Haddad, their books, is that whatever the subject is, it's going to get back to the heart of the matter. Right? It's going to go back to these realities, because everything revolves around these realities, and these realities are what makes a human being. Right? If the measure of being a human being was to collect information, then we have MP3 players and CDs that can store a lot more information. You could put multiple volumes of libraries on that. Right? If it was to be strong, there's animals that are stronger than human beings. If it was to be physically, right? Whatever it is that's not what defines. That's not what makes human beings. But what really defines a true human being is that it's qualities of the heart. It's qualities of the heart. So it's amazing that Imam Haddad, he always goes back to these qualities of the heart. We can develop them.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This is from Knowledge and Wisdom by Imam al-Haddad. May we benefit from him. Amen. Chapter 3, Good Times and Evil Times.
It was interesting that he just said in the last book, he said, he talked about the times. And he said that, he's saying that these are times, right? That these are times where people are neglectful. These are times, he's complaining about his times. Right? So imagine what it would be like if he saw our times. But somebody might ask, what does it mean? What does it mean, good times and bad times? And what does it mean that the days are good or bad? And that now he's going to clarify this in this chapter. And that this is an interesting book, because this, as he mentions in the introduction, he didn't sit down and write this book formally like how someone would normally write a book. Is that he says that these are kind of the produce of his inspirations. And like we mentioned in the beginning, is that sitting in good company you can have openings. And Imam Haddad explicitly says that in his different sessions of teachings and remindings, is that certain thoughts would come to his mind, and that they would stay with him, and that later on he penned down these thoughts. So generally speaking, this book is very precise and is very insightful. It's a very insightful book. It's these gifts that he received throughout his reminders and teaching. So he go ahead.
In every epoch, there's always existed both good and evil, virtuous people and villains, people who do good and others who corrupt. When at a given time virtue...
Right, so this is also important for us to think about. Is that, what is the golden age? Is there even such thing as a golden age? Right, we kind of romanticize history, where we think that, there was just this once upon a time, everything was good, everything was perfect. It's never, ever, ever been like that. And even if you read history, not necessarily Islamic history, or even Islamic history to some degree, that some of the stuff that you read are unbelievable. Like, you wonder how people could have done that, and how did those systems survive, and people weren't using their intelligence. How could they have not? Like, you wonder things like that when you read some of the stuff that's truly amazing. So even in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, right, if you think about it, when they went out for the Battle of Uhud, right, they mention about 30% of the army actually didn't go out, and they're considered from the hypocrites. Right, that's like 30% of the Prophet ﷺ's army, of the people of Medina, in the Prophet's time, spending time with him, seeing him, that they didn't actually truly believe, and that they were considered to be hypocrites. Right, so we shouldn't think that there's some time that everything was perfect, and we kind of have that false romantic. We have to realize that there were struggles, right? Everyone had struggles, and when we were reading Sahih Muslim, that's one of the things that became apparent to me, is that if you look at some of the stuff that the people are coming to the Prophet with, it's like, wow, that's amazing. Somebody's murdered, somebody hit somebody else. Amazing things are just coming, and the amazing thing is that the Prophet is solving all these problems. Right? Someone's coming with this, and he get that hadith, and then that hadith becomes a principle, then that hadith becomes fiqh rulings, and then that's the ruling. But if you just think about the things that they were coming with, you're like, wow. Right? There's one hadith, there's one incident where one of the other companions actually bit another companion, or another person, and his teeth broke, his front teeth broke. And then he came to the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet said, does somebody bite somebody like an animal? Right? And then the ruling came where the Prophet ﷺ solved that problem. But you have to think about that, like, that's not the companions that we think about. Right? Those are the sabiqun al-sabiqun. Those were the prophets. Those were the companions that were with the Prophet ﷺ. But there was there weren't a lot of other people that believed in the Prophet ﷺ. But they weren't necessarily, refined like the companions that we know about. And then it mentioned that there's that hadith also in Sahih Muslim. Amazing is that one of the companions, he mentions he migrates to Medina with a friend of his, and then that friend he gets sick in Medina, and then he gets frustrated, and he kills himself. He slits his own wrists, and the hadith explicitly mentioned that. And then his companion sees a dream where he's actually in a good state, and then he goes to the Prophet, and then he says, what happened to you? What did Allah do to you? And then he said that Allah forgave me because I migrated to His Prophet ﷺ. Right? But if you just think about that, like you don't suicide. Right? It's serious issues, and that's why we shouldn't when there's problems. Right? When there's problems in the community, when there's problems with people, we shouldn't take that on a super, like, what's wrong with you, or that's a super. We shouldn't be immature about it. Right? There's a lot of things that, real situations. There's companions that, all types of things. There's companions that got divorced. There's companions that had difficulties, and almost everything that we're facing now, you'll see it in their lives. And that, the Prophet ﷺ, have to have maturity with that. But what Imam Haddad is saying here, if that's the case, if it's always been like that, so when can we call a time a good time, and when can we call it a bad time? So there's always going to be good and bad, but when is it actually called this is a blessed era, or a golden era, and when is it, bad times? So what's the criteria for that? So that's what he says, that's what he's getting into over here. Yeah.
When at a given time virtue, goodness, loyalty, and righteous behavior are manifest and predominant,
right,
and corruption, error, and their people are subdued and inconspicuous, that time is said to be good and righteous. Such were the times of the Prophet. May God's blessings and peace be upon him and his family, and of his rightly guided successors.
Right. Okay, yeah, carry on.
When the time and its people are predominantly evil and corrupt, when good is scarce and the virtuous few and hidden, such times are attributed to evil and temptations, and said to be evil and wicked, times of temptations and afflictions. Thus are times described according to the predominant attributes. For no times are ever entirely without good or evil. Our current times and those immediately before them.
It's interesting, right? So if you look at manifestations from the public and what's generally accepted and what's generally not accepted, because even though, even in the Prophet's time, we mentioned there was hypocrites, there was all types of things going on, and that those people cannot openly declare things and openly say things, and they had to remain hidden because goodness and righteousness was predominant, right? And if you look at the hadith that talk about signs towards the end of times, you'll see that it's all the inversion of what's the norm. So instead of having a just ruler that people support and that supports the people, is that you'll have rulers that are corrupt and that ruin things. Instead of having true scholars that are beneficial, you have pseudo scholars that also are corrupt. So it's all about the inversion. So good times is when good is encouraged, good is publicly encouraged, it's manifest, right? But bad times is when the voice of reason, the voice of goodness is subdued and it's pushed aside, it's marginalized. And that's why you'll find you hear people talk about Tareem, and they talk about how blessed it is, and you don't also want to romanticize it and think that this is Jannah on earth. Is that people have problems in Tareem, people especially Westerners, some things happen, people have fights in the Dora house. We've seen these things before. However, there's not much consideration to that, because overall, right, places like that, they still call the adhan for tahajjud every night. And you'll go to the masjid for tahajjud time and you'll see common people who are going to work right after fajr, is that they're sitting in the masjid and reading Qur'an. Right, between Maghrib and Isha, you'll find people reading Qur'an. Right, on Thursdays you'll find the masjid, on Fridays, everything. Right, it's all there. Like, you can't go there and then come with something that's strange and something that's evil and expect to be accepted. No one's going to accept you like that. People might have things on the side that they do privately. That's one thing. Right, but you can't come there and try to change the values of Tareem. And that's how, that's why you'd say it's a blessed place. That's why you say it's a special place. It's not paradise on earth. There's problems. Wherever you go is yourself, and you're bringing your nafs with you. Right? But the atmosphere, right, is a good atmosphere that promotes good. Right? The atmosphere is an atmosphere that promotes good. And that's what we need to develop, because obviously, these are times where the atmosphere does not promote good. It promotes, for the most part, the opposite. Right? The messages that people are getting, it's very subtle too. Right? Subliminal messages and very, very subtle things. Right? People, they study these things and they have, they understand the psychology of people, and then they kind of subtly put it back in their minds. There's examples about that, but so that's the criteria for. So what we should take from this is not to be deceived or to romanticize things, right? To take things on a realistic level. People might be struggling when we meet them wherever they're at, but at the same time recognize what's the criteria for good times and bad times. And then Imam Haddad, he goes on to say about his time that he was living in, where he says,
"Thus are times described according to their predominant attributes. For no times are entirely without good or evil. Our current times and those immediately before them are predominantly corrupt, evil, and villainous. Good and virtue are rare, and superior and virtuous people few. Inconspicuous, subdued, and vanquished. God it is whose help we seek. He is sufficient for us, and He is the best of custodians."
Next book.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. This is the Book of Assistance by Imam al-Haddad. We are on page number 34. The aim and spirit of Awrad is presence with God. Aim for it. You will reach it only if you travel the road and leads to it, which is performing the external activities and striving to be present with God during them. When you persevere in this,
you become immersed in the lights of proximity, and the sciences of gnosis emanate upon you, at which your heart becomes wholly intent on God, and presence becomes its nature and well-established quality. At that time, you have to exert yourself to be attentive to creatures when you need to, and you may not always be able to.
So Imam Haddad brings it back to the heart of the matter, right? So we might feel comfortable that we have our awrad and we do things and we attend different programs, and that's great, but it has an outward form and has a reality, and that we should never be content with the mere outward form. So the outward form of awrad is performing them, saying them, reading them, reciting them, but then what's the inward reality of the awrad, which is what we're really getting at. So everything has a shell, right? The lub, and then it has the lub, it has the essence, it has the essence that's sought. So he says that. Can you just repeat the first passage? Al-Maqasid al-Awwabin. The purpose of the
the aim and spirit of awrad is presence with God. Aim for it. You will reach it only if you travel the road that leads to it, which is performing external activities and striving to be present.
The aim, the purpose, and the spirit of awrad is to achieve the presence with God, right? So the awrad, one of the ways that we can look at it, it's like a door that we open and that we expose ourselves to drawing closer to Allah. And the more two things, they have to be consistent, and they have to have that concentration, that presence. And that the more someone performs their awrad with this quality, is that door gets open and it gets larger and larger for that person, and that they have meanings of presence of Allah, and they develop that. So it's like a acquired taste, right? It's not something that you just perform the awrad and you get it right away, but slowly and consistently is that you start to understand, and you get meanings, and again you get those openings, and then you'll find that you understand the meaning of the presence of Allah, that you feel the presence of Allah, and to the point where he says that your default will be that you're in the presence of Allah, and then it'll get hard for you to be with people, and be in and to be not in the presence of Allah.
Such a condition results in one becoming absent from creation, engrossed in the Creator, and extend through anything that is not Him. It also leads to others states special to the people of God. The foundation of all this is perseverance in outward devotions and taking care to perform them well, and with an effort to be attentive with God.
Alright, so two integrals is that perseverance, right, and presence. So it's like an example that they give is that if someone wants to cut a tree, is that one, they need good tools, and two, they need to be consistent with that. And if someone took an axe that wasn't very sharp and they just tried to cut down the tree, is that they're not going to get too far with that. And likewise, if someone had an axe that was very sharp but they just hit the tree once or twice and then they left it, is that likewise it's not going to affect the tree. But if someone's tools are sharp, if someone has that quality, and they have quality in their dhikr, and they have quality in their awrad, and with that quality is that they're consistent, then that produces fruits. So it's two integrals. It's quality, right, and quantity. And we need to join between both.
But at the same time, sometimes you may be persistence, but you may not find the presence all the time.
Right.
So that's a journey.
So I think he says right afterwards. Right. That's right.
Beware of leaving a wird for fear of not being able to persevere in it, for this is foolishness.
Right. So that's the answer.
You should not do in each period of time, whatever happens.
So the point is that quality, we don't necessarily always have control of the quality of our awrad. Right? Some days something's on our mind, some days something's bothering us, some days our minds we're just not focused. Fine. But what we do have in our control, for the most part, is to be able to arrange our time and to be consistent. So what we have to do is make that effort to achieve the quality and make sure that we don't lapse in our awrad. And that's the beautiful thing, is that that's what he's saying, is that if we're seeking this and we're sincere, is that Allah will open up the door. So you might not find it at first, but if we're seeking it and we're consistent, then inshallah, Allah is generous. He'll open up things for us.
You should not do in each period of time whatever happens to suit your energy and free time. On the contrary, you should have a minimum that you perform, which you can add to whatever you feel energetic, but never fall below when you feel lazy.
Right, this is an amazing piece of advice. This is something that we should really take to heart, is that whatever we do, there should be a bare minimum. Right? If you feel, however you feel, and this regards to awrad, to studies, to whatever habit somebody wants to inculcate, is that there should be a bare minimum that, regardless of the circumstances, as long as you're physically able to, that you'll do that. And if you feel, even if you're having the worst day, right? And this is how, the salah is like that. Doesn't matter your state, you still have to perform salah. So it doesn't matter your circumstances, that you're going to perform your bare minimum. And then if you have energy on some days, you could increase, there's no problem. If you have free time, you could add more, there's no problem. But you never leave that bare minimum. And that this is how we achieve barakah and blessing in what we do. And they mentioned that there's one shaykh, one scholar, Ashraf Ali Tanwi, that he had a practice of writing. He used to write a lot of different works, and he has, I can't remember how many books that he has, but he has a whole library of books that he wrote in his life. And every day he would write. And one time his respected teachers came to visit him, so he found himself in this dilemma that he would spend that time writing, but now it's bad adab if you're by yourself writing and then your teachers are there. So what does he do? So he's with his teachers, he's serving his teachers, and then he excuses himself and he just goes up to his private quarters and he writes 3 lines. And he just writes 3 lines, and then he says that's it. And he comes back and he goes back to his teachers, and his teachers asked him about that, and he said, okay, I had this practice of writing and I didn't want to leave it, but at the same time I can't leave your company. So then the teacher said, that's why you're successful in what you do, is that you have that perseverance, that despite whatever happens, is that you preserve that. Right? And likewise we should do that if it's attending the gatherings, if it's having a study that we study, if it's reading a book. Right? Maybe there's a certain book that we can read a page a day, or a paragraph a day, or a passage a day, but we never leave that and neglect that and turn away from that. So that's where there's a lot of khair in that. So this is really important advice for whatever habit someone wants to develop, is that just be persistent, and there's fruits, there's benefits in that.
You mind yourself? I'd like to add something here regarding the habits. So actually I've been reading on exactly what you're saying. You gave the example of the scholar. Basically what happens, our brain gets, when the habit is well developed, it becomes who you are, and you can't live without it.
Right.
So that's why it gives example of salah. Some people are consistent with salah. They have to perform salah. They can't live without it. And then certain example of our daily life, brushing our teeth. Brushing. You don't even know that you're doing it, but it becomes your habit. The same thing, they have to perform the bare minimum.
Right.
What they do just becomes who they are.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, let's get a qasida from Sayyid, inshallah. Well,
اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد. نحمد الله على الخير الكثير، نعمة التوحيد والدين اليسير، ورسول جاء بالحق بشير، وإلى الله تعالى المصير. نحمد الله على الخير الكثير، نعمة التوحيد والدين اليسير، ورسول جاء بالحق بشير، ونذيرا بالكتاب المستنير، وإلى الله تعالى المصير. أيها الناس أطيعوا واسمعوا واستجيبوا واستقيموا واتبعوا، وإلى الله أنيبوا واسرعوا قبل أن يأتيكم اليوم العسير، وإلى الله تعالى المصير. ظهر الحق فلم يبق ارتياب، وبدت شمس الهداية والصواب، فانهضوا من قبل أن يرخى الحجاب، واعملوا للخلد في اليوم القسير، وإلى الله تعالى المصير. واستعدوا لملاقاة العظيم بامتثال الأمر والقلب السليم، واجتناب النهي والفعل الذميم، واحذروا عصيان ذي العرش القدير، وإلى الله تعالى المصير. أيها الناس اتقوا دار الفناء واحذروها، إنها رأس العناء، واطلبوا دار الكرامة والهناء والنعيم المحض والملك الكبير، وإلى الله تعالى المصير. كيف ترضون بدنيا لا تدوم، حشيت شغلا وبؤسا وهموم، وعناء وبلاء وغموم، فارفضوها إنها النذر الحقير، وإلى الله تعالى المصير. أيها الناس أطيعوا من خلق وتفضل وتطول ورزاق، وتوحد وتفرد واستحق كل حمد وتقدس عن نظير، وإلى الله تعالى المصير.
So now we recite Al-Fatiha and then the first few verses of Surah Al-Baqarah, and then Ayat Al-Kursi, and the last verses of Surah Al-Baqarah, and then Surah Al-Ikhlas 11 times, and then the 2 Quls So we start with the Fatiha. Bismillah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladhina an'amta alayhim. Ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Amin. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alif Lam Mim. Dhalikal kitabu la rayba fihi hudan lil muttaqin. الذين يؤمنون بالغيب ويقيمون الصلاة ومما رزقناهم ينفقون والذين يؤمنون بما أنزل إليك وما أنزل من قبلك وبالآخرة هم يوقنون أولئك على هدى من ربهم وأولئك هم المفلحون آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون كل آمن بالله وملائكته وكتب رسله لا نفرق بين أحد من رسله وقالوا سمعنا وأطعنا غفرانك ربنا وإليك المصير لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها لها ما كسبت وعليها ما اكتسبت ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين آمين الله لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض من ذا الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يحيطون بشيء من علمه إلا بما شاء وسع كرسي السماوات والأرض ولا يعوذ حفظهما والعلي العظيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد
بسم الله الرحمن
الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم
قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ بالفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ بالناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر الوسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس. And then all of that is donated to our parents and those who are present and those who passed on and those who are passed on from these lands and أموات المسلمين وكافة الأعمة ثم دعاء للمسلمين بالفرج العاجل واللطف الشامل والصلاح العام والله الولي التوفيق وإلى سيدنا الفاتحة.